Decided to go with a clean screen and a clean video for part C. Part C, what they want you to do is find the inverse function of f. So we take function f and we switch your x into y. So f of x, which is y, becomes x, and x over on the right side becomes y. And then you simply take this equation and solve for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 75 and get 75x equals 2y squared plus 3. Subtract 3 from both sides. 75x minus 3 equals 2y squared. Divide both sides by 2. 75x minus 3 over 2, all over 2, equals y squared. Take the square root of both sides. Y, or f inverse, equals the square root of 75x minus 3 over 2. Now it's not plus or minus, it's a function, so we don't have to worry about plus or minus. Now, next part, find the domain and the range. Well, the domain is everything x can be. If you look at the numerator under the radical, that numerator is the determining factor of what the domain is, because what's under the radical cannot be less than 0. So what we do, we think, well, the only way it's going to be less than 0 is if the denominator is less than, or the numerator is less than 0. So we take the numerator, which is 75x minus 3, and we say, well, we know that that has to be greater than or equal to 0. You solve this inequality by taking the 3 to the other side, and then divide both sides by 75, so you know that x has to be greater than or equal to 3/75. So this is the domain. Now the range is the type of answers you get, and think again, you got a square root, so you know all the answers have to be positive. And can we get a 0 as an answer? Sure, if the numerator equals 0, which it can, so y is greater than or equal to 0 is the range. And that's the end of part C. Okay, I'm going to erase all this stuff, and then we'll get into that last part. All right, the last part says show the probability distributions. If these are probability distribution functions given to the domain 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, probability distribution has your random variables x and the probability. So if f of x is the probability of something happening given those values of x that they gave us, what you want to do is set up a little table, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and sub those numbers into f of x. And those will be the probabilities. So if you put a 0 in there, you get 3/75. Put a 1 in there, you get 5/75. Put a 2 in there, you get 11/75. Put a 3 in there, you get 21/75. I hope my mental arithmetic is working. 2 times 9 is 18. That's right. 4 would be 16 times 2, 32, 35/75. Okay, so that is the probability distribution function if f of x is a probability distribution, if it's actually a function. And that's what we're going to determine next. Now we have to do g of x, so we do the same thing. X, g of x, and put in our numbers 0 through 4 in the top row, and then calculate what their probabilities would be. If we put a 0 in there, we get 4/10. Put a 1 in there, you get 3 minus 4, 1/10. It's absolute value. Put a 2 in there, you get 6 minus 4, 2/10. 3 in there would be 5/10. And a 4 in there is 12 minus 4 is 8/10. Now the problem is, it says determine which f or g could be a probability distribution. Well, it can't be g. And the reason is, if you look at it, the numerators add up to be more than 10. In other words, remember, the bottom row represents the probabilities, and the sum of the probabilities has to equal 1. So we need to check f of x. So we got 8 and 11 is 19, 19 and 21 is 40, 40 and 35 is 75/75. Therefore, the answer is f can be, I'm not going to write it all out, f can be a probability distribution function because the sum of the probabilities f of x is equal to 1. And the last part of this problem says use this probability distribution, meaning f of x, to calculate the mean. Now the mean of a probability distribution function is simply each probability times the function. and the sum of those. So in other words, we take 0 times 375, which is 0. And then 1 times 5/75, 2 times 11, 3 times 21, and last but not least, 4 times 35, which is 140/75. And this, you just add those up. Oh, let's see, what do we get? Well, 140 and 63 is 203. 203 and 22 is 225, and 5 is 230/75. Not guaranteed, but I think that's right. I don't have answers in front of me. All right, that is the end of problem 11.